Dr. Nick Wignall. Thanks so much for joining today.
Hey, on. Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, really excited to hear what you have to say. You're one of my very early mentors before I even started on the psychology career path. And I still remember a presentation you gave about a career in psychology that was a big influence in inspiring me to embark on it. And it's been cool following your progress. So, just to give our listeners a little bit of an introduction, can you just talk a little bit about yourself and where you are right now?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Nick Wignall. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been here for the last 7 years or so. I came here right after grad school, after finishing grad school. I did my graduate education at the University of Chicago and then University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center is where I got my PhD. So I came out here and I started practicing in a small group practice doing clinical work, mostly specializing in insomnia and anxiety, panic in particular. So those were kind of two of my things I spent a lot of time doing. And I just worked one-on-one with folks doing individual therapy for, let's see, about 6 years, I think. And then more recently, I've started working I work for a startup in the kind of corporate consulting space, doing kind of well-being and culture consulting with organizations and teams. And then on the side of all that, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, I've had a blog and a newsletter for the last 7 years, and I do podcasting and videos and courses and workshops and all sorts of stuff, kind of on the topic of emotional health, broadly speaking. So I think that about kind of sums up, at least kind of professionally. I have a wife and 4 little kids out here in New Mexico. That's a big part of the story. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, you have a beautiful family. I saw the picture on your website. You're really blessed.
That's
So
true.
I know you're an excellent therapist, and today I want to focus on your non-clinical professional career path, or at least outside of the specific like practice that you've been working with. Can you just walk us through the story of how you started? I think it was with the blog, and then how it developed from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the most appropriate place to talk about starting it is frustration. I think that was kind of like the motivating. I'm a psychologist. Here I am talking about emotions, no surprise. But I think that really was kind of the impetus to start doing kind of extracurricular activities, so to speak, on the side of my professional work as a therapist. And when I say frustration, it was kind of frustration with my field in general, because I felt like we had the field of mental health and psychology more broadly. It's got a lot of problems, and it's a relatively young field, so it's got a lot of room for growth, I think. But over the last 150 years, we've accumulated a lot of, I think, really helpful insights and practices that can help people with their emotional health. But a lot of them are kind of locked behind therapists' offices and kind of in research labs. And there's so many of these things that just could be really helpful outside of the clinical world. But for whatever reason, I just didn't see them out there. And a lot of what I saw when it comes to kind of general advice for mental or emotional health was kind of lightweight, maybe is the way to think about it. And then we had this really rigorous, solid kind of insights and, again, techniques and practices in the clinical and the research world, but they either literally weren't making it out at all into the public realm, or they did, but it was done in a way where they were too esoteric and obscure and researchy and overly academic. The form of them was, so it was really hard, I think, for people to actually grok on and understand and see why it would be helpful. So anyway, that was just like really frustrating to me. I remember thinking when I first started working with insomnia clients, I didn't know anything about insomnia. I didn't study it all in grad school. I didn't do anything until I got into this practice. And my boss he was like the head editor for this journal, and he wanted someone to do a book review on this new book that was on a treatment for insomnia, a cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia. And so he asked me to do it. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about that, but it looks interesting. So I read the book, and I was blown away by this book, like so blown away that there was this incredibly effective treatment for insomnia that almost nobody knew about. I'd never even heard of it going through grad school in clinical psychology. And it was like the research showed, like over and over and over again, it was remarkably effective, like way better than standard kind of like generic sleep hygiene tips or medication or like whatever the usual stuff people think of for insomnia. Anyway, so I got so interested in this, I was like, well, I'm going to start doing this. I went to some conferences. I went, took some workshops. I learned how to do this approach. And sure enough, it was wildly effective. Like so many clients I had suffered with insomnia for decades, and within months, like gone, cured. Like you don't use the C word in mental health very often, but like completely cured from it. And I'm just thinking to myself, hey, this is crazy. Like I was like excited. Like this is so wild that we can be so good at something. Because in mental health, honestly, like we're not that good at that many things. Like even a lot of our best approaches are somewhat effective for some people. So to have something that was like wildly effective for a lot of people was just really exciting. But then again, the frustration crept in, which was, this is nuts that just only people who have, a diagnosis of insomnia who are coming in to see like a mental health professional who happens to know about this treatment, which is a tiny fraction. Most mental health professionals have never heard of CBTI or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. I'm like, this is nuts. There's so many people with insomnia out there who could easily benefit from just one or two of like the core pieces of this protocol for treating insomnia. And so again, there's that frustration. Like, this is stupid. This is stupid that more people don't know about this. And it's not that hard, or it shouldn't be that hard. It doesn't seem that hard for me to kind of package this up in a relatively accessible way and say like, hey, here's this thing. Try this if you've got insomnia. So I sort of thought like, what the hell? Like I'll start a blog. I guess that was like a thing people did. So I spun up a website and a newsletter, and I just started writing articles about like, what is insomnia and how to overcome it, and CBTI for insomnia, or things about panic attacks and how panic worked and stuff like that. And initially, crickets. Like I'd look at my analytics on my website and it was 0 people have visited your website today. And I'd send out my newsletter every week and it would go to 10 people, half of whom were family members. But I think I had that sort of inner kind of drive, again, largely driven by frustration. Like it just, I was like getting mad every single day that this stuff wasn't more widely available. And so I think the combination of that frustration and I just really, I did therapy for a long time, and I enjoy doing therapy, but I think at heart, I'm a teacher. Like I love explaining things, and I love explaining things in emotional health, especially. And so writing about these things and trying to capture the substance of the, what we know from research and practice, but in a way that's really accessible and appealing and, anyone can sort of understand and take in. I love doing that. It was just really fun. So I've been doing it ever since. Basically, I started, I think it was September, October of 2017. I sent my first weekly newsletter, and I haven't missed a week since. Been doing it ever since then. So sorry, I'm talking your head off, but like, I think frustration, that was the impotence at the beginning.
Yeah, I think the reason people like your newsletter blog is the same reason why you're such an engaging speaker. It's encouraging, it's cheerful, you get the positive energy from it, it's super clear, and it's just science-based content. So how many subscribers or viewers do you have now, and what did it take to grow to that?
Yeah, so my main metric is newsletter subscribers. That's always been sort of my North Star. When I don't really care that much about social media, but newsletter subscribers, for one thing, they're sort of you're working on kind of owned territory, so to speak. When you're building an audience on, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, they're not your audience. Like those companies can do something, change the algorithm, do something drastically different, than your bummer. But if people have given you their email address, that's a very intimate thing, right? And no one can really kind of like, no company can take that away, right? You've always got this connection, this one-to-one connection with your audience. So anyway, that has always been my kind of main metric for what am I going for when I'm thinking about kind of building an audience, broadly speaking. And I have about 50,000. I just passed 50,000 subscribers on my newsletter. Thank you. And it's pretty engaged. I get like a between 50 and 60% open rates, which is pretty good. And yeah, I get lots of people writing in and asking questions, and in fact, it's almost sort of turned into like an advice column, because I get so many questions that I turn that into a segment of the newsletter, which is I pick one of the questions someone writes in, and then do like a short essay, kind of answering or trying to answer that question. So yeah, that's about. And then your second part of your question, I guess, was what did it take to get there? I don't know, if you were to look at like the graph of my subscribers over the time, there's nothing particularly interesting about it. Like there aren't any like huge leaps, or like, it's not like the hockey stick thing. It's just this kind of fairly linear kind of progression up and to the right. And so I think there's a million factors, and we can talk about more specific ones that maybe are more interesting. But I think if I had to say, like, the biggest one is just sticking with it. I think I found something that I have a knack for. Like, I think I'm fairly good at it, and it resonates for people. But I think more importantly, it's something that I just am really, I still get up like excited to like write my newsletter after 8 years or whatever of doing it. I just have a lot of kind of internal intrinsic motivation to do that. I'm excited about it. I'm frustrated that other people aren't doing it. And so I've stayed in the game long enough to just sort of like accumulate a decent sized audience. So I think that's probably the most important thing.
Hmm. So no particular kind of marketing strategies. It just grew organically from the 10 people up to where it is now.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I do like capital M marketing at all. I do. So if you think about, well, like, where do I get subscribers? I have for almost from the beginning, I have been reposting. So when I write an article, anything, it goes on my website, one of my two websites. Then I send out like a blurb, like a brief description of it, and a link in my newsletter every week. And so people then jump over to the website to read my stuff. But I also literally just kind of copy and paste the articles, and I post them on Medium, which is it's not exactly a social media platform. It's a little more like YouTube. Like YouTube, you wouldn't necessarily call YouTube a social media platform like you would Twitter or Facebook or something like that. It's more like a content platform. Anyway, and long form writing is the thing on Medium. And so I repost everything on Medium because that gets me exposure to a much larger audience. And so I've been doing that again for 7 or 8 years now. And so that has been a huge chunk, a huge percentage of my audience growth. And then just sort of people finding me organically based on Google. You know, if you write long enough and you write content that is fairly decent, Google sort of, indexes it and prioritizes it, shows it to people when someone searches, how to get rid of insomnia or something. If you've written an article on insomnia that's really high quality, it'll sort of bubble to the surface and people will find you that way. So those have been the two primary ways that people have come to me. And then I've always been very intentional about anywhere I am online, I'm always linking people to my newsletter. So I have a landing page on my website that's like very simple, and it just says like, here's my newsletter, here's what it's about. Put your email in and join that's what I want people to do. I want people to kind of get into my more intimate orbit on the newsletter. And then once they're in there, they can, they get access to they see everything. I can point them in different directions. And so that's always kind of been the main goal. So yeah, sorry, long-winded answer to your question.
No, this is excellent. So in terms of cost benefit, like cost would be time, which would include like the opportunity cost, what you could be doing with that time. And then the benefit would be, what is exactly the benefit? How would you weigh the cost benefits of this?
Yeah. You mean of just sort of having this as a site, blogging, writing, teaching, the whole thing?
Because writing well takes time. And as a therapist, your time is very valuable. So I'm just wondering, what is the benefit of it, and how do you weigh that?
Yeah. So I'll start with the benefits. The big one, if I'm totally honest, like, is kind of selfish. Like, I just like doing it in a weird way. It's like my hobby. Like, I don't golf. Like, I don't go drinking at the bar with my buddies. Like, I don't know, whatever other things. I don't collect stamps. But I do really like to write, and I like to write. I love just sort of talking about emotional health, but mostly, like, I like teaching. Like, I just really like doing it. Like, you can ask my kids and my wife and my friends, I end up teaching even when I'm not asked to, because I just love explaining things. I learn about something new and I can't help myself. But so the benefit is, like, it's my hobby. Like, why do people do hobbies in general? Like, I don't know. It's enjoyable sense of progress. Like, I think we all, it's one of those like most motivating things in life, I think, is like having some sort of a project where you consistently feel like you're putting an effort and then making progress based on that. And for, for a lot of us, it's our jobs, our work, could be hobbies, could be our sports league that we part, like whatever. Like, we like a sense of progress. And so that's certainly like, just for me personally, like I get a strong sense of, I like getting better at something and helping other people get better, and getting the little reward from doing that. Like, it just feels good to be sort of making progress, whether that's seeing your subscriber count pop up or having more and more people write into you saying how helpful stuff was. I just like that, just kind of selfishly. It just feels good. So that's one on that level. And I say that because I think that's a little underrated. There's other reasons, and I'll get into those, but I think that's been a big part of at least the kind of sustainability of a project like this for me, is this. I just have so much intrinsic motivation for it. I almost couldn't not do it in a way. And then other things are like socially, like the relationships I've built as a result of this have been incredible. Like professional, I mean, yeah, all sorts of other mental health professionals that I've gotten to know over time, either because I've had them on my podcast or I've met them on Twitter and, struck up a relationship. Friends, I have a whole bunch of, I joined this writing group early on in my writing career, most of whom are in Europe. And so I have this whole group of like European friends now. And we talk regularly, and we meet up on Zoom, and we have a little chat group and all sorts. So I've literally made friends doing it. And then even professional opportunities. A few years ago, I left my clinical practice because at the time, this random guy read one of my articles, really liked it, and he was looking to start a company, and he wanted a he wanted a psychologist, someone with a research background and a psychology background on board. And he just emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, like, let's talk." And so that literally led to a whole new job and even career potentially. So stuff like that has been there's so much benefit, like relationally, I think, from a project like this. And then the other one that I would say is just kind of for my own, I don't know, sort of career and like financial future. I always knew about myself that I'm a fairly good employee because I'm a pretty conscientious person, but I have a personality such that I really love doing things that I am really interested in. Like I will just work, to no end. Like I have no problem being disciplined and like working hard on something I'm really passionate about. As evidenced by like this whole project. Like it doesn't seem like work to me. It's honestly just really fun and energizing. But I hate doing stuff that I'm not interested in. Like really hate it. And I'm decent at being I can kind of suppress that when I need to and be a reasonably productive, conscientious employee. But I've always known about myself that's probably not sustainable. Like eventually I want to be in a situation where I'm kind of calling the shots. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs and tend to be around a lot of people like that anyway. So I think I've always known that that's somewhere off in the future. It wasn't immediately in the future, like 8 years ago or whenever when I started. I was just starting to become a therapist, and I knew, I wanted to really see what this was like and put in the reps and get good at it and learn a lot from it. And so I was in no hurry to kind of go off and do my own thing. But I knew that eventually that was a place I wanted to get to. And so I thought, well, this thing I like doing anyway, writing and teaching online, if I kind of build up a audience and a reputation and a skill set for doing this well, this could be the platform for me doing my own thing professionally later on. So I think that was a big, that's been a big benefit. And I think will continue to be, will pay dividends, so to speak, in the future. So that's a big one. Downsides, you asked about downsides. Certainly time, like you said, there's always opportunity costs. But if I'm really honest, like I feel pretty good about this trade-off. Like again, I don't go golfing for 3 hours every weekend. Some people love to golf. Like maybe I would love something like that too, but I don't know. I feel like I have this thing I love. So it doesn't seem like it's worth trading that off just to go explore other things that have less certainty that I would love this much. I think like it's a relatively rare thing to find kind of a hobby or a passion that you're that excited about and that you can invest that much time and energy into. And frankly, I just don't like time and energy are limited. Like I have my family and my career take up the vast majority of my time and energy. And like, I don't have that much space left for anything. So this fits really well for me as like a hobby or like a third thing in the pie chart. And I'm just super satisfied with it so far. So to be honest, I don't think a ton. I love the idea, and I think it's a really important thing to do to think about opportunity costs and trade-offs. Um, but I think I feel pretty confident that there aren't any significant ones with this at this point.
Yeah, yeah, you're seeing it kind of like a hobby. And how much
Mm-hmm.
time does it take for you to produce a good blog post? And is there any direct financial incentive?
How much time and is there a direct financial incentive? Yeah. So I would say in general, I'm a pretty quick writer. I think I've always been a relatively quick writer. And then having done this for so long, I've developed kind of a format and a style of writing that I'm pretty quick at. So I can write most of my articles are between maybe, I don't know, 1,200 and 1,800 words, something like that. And I can I can draft the article in between an hour and 20 minutes, probably. And when I say draft, like it's 95% of the way done. I basically copy and paste it
Wow.
into Google Docs and spell check it after that. But I don't do like rewrites or stuff like that. And that not because I'm opposed to that, but just the style of content I put out there is it it has this kind of casual. It has an element of it being casual. I'm not trying to write like the definitive guide to whatever or a research article or something like that. Like it's almost like an advice column, that you would read, back in the day. So that helps. That makes it. I don't have to do and I'm writing about something. I think this is key. I'm writing about topics that I spent close to a decade talking about every single day with people. So when I go to write an article about insomnia or panic, or chronic worry or something like that, I've the article is essentially like a version of a conversation I've had 500 times. So just kind of spitting it out onto paper. I write like I talk, and so to me, writing is like it's almost like hopping on a podcast, and someone says, "So I keep getting panic attacks, even though I've tried X, Y, and Z. Like, what do you recommend?" And like as everyone listening now can tell, I can just sort of start gabbing and like go off the cuff about something like that. And I seem to be able to do that on writing just as easily as I do in visual or audio format. Doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but anyway. So I think I'm a fairly fast writer, and then in terms of the direct, there isn't a super direct financial benefit to putting the articles out. The closest I get to a direct financial benefit is Medium has a partner program, much like YouTube's partner program, where if you're big enough, if you generate enough views, they'll pay you some amount per view, essentially. So at this point, I built up a big enough audience to where that becomes a pretty significant number at the end of every month. So if you like averaged out over the last few years, my earnings from the Medium partner program, remember I write an article, goes to my newsletter, my website, but then I repost it to Medium, right? And so on a given month, I don't know, there's a bunch of those. And so I probably make between $2,000 and $5,000 a month from Medium partner program earnings. So that's a fairly direct income generator. But really the more valuable thing with doing that is the newsletter subscribers I get, because those people then come into my orbit and they can buy much more expensive things that I offer. So courses and workshops and stuff like that. So it's kind of a twofer, right? You get you get new subscribers because people read the article and then they join my email list, and Medium pays me something for basically giving them content for their platform.
Hmm. Okay, let's jump into these other offerings that you have. How did
Mm-hmm.
they develop, and what's your vision with them?
Yeah. So other paid kind of
Hmm.
products or offerings. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I do a few things. I do one-off workshops. So probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 times a year, I'll do a 60 or 90 minute workshop over Zoom. And I only advertise it to my newsletter. I say, the week before, I'm like, hey, I'm going to do a workshop on insomnia, or I'm going to do a workshop on how to communicate better with your spouse, or whatever. I do all sorts of topics. And then, I put together kind of it's usually a deck, like it's on a specific topic. And my goal for those is I want to teach one specific tool or like exercise or technique, right? So it might be, if I'm doing one on chronic worry and anxiety, I love, my favorite technique or exercise in that kind of domain is something called scheduled worry. Like, it's a specific exercise you can do. And so I'll spend 20 minutes describing what chronic worry and anxiety are, like why they're a problem, whatever. I'll show this exercise, and then I'll do like 20 or 30 minutes for Q&A where people can ask questions. And those are like, I think $35. So I want those to be pretty accessible. Like, people, it's almost anyone could afford if they were interested in a particular topic. $35, and then you get the recording and stuff like that afterwards. So that's the workshops.
How many participants
and I typically,
you get for that?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I think you were about to say how many participants you get for that.
Yeah. So I will often, I end up getting, I don't know, like I'd say around 50 maybe is my average. So some of them, depending on the topic, if it's a more obscure topic, I might get 30. If it's a really popular topic, I might get 70 or 80. So it depends a lot on the topic itself. So I do those. And then I do bigger courses, and I basically have two types of courses. I have standalone courses, my current standalone course, or not standalone, self-paced course. So it's a video course, and there's no live component. You purchase the course, and then you work through the videos and the exercises and stuff at your own pace, whatever you want. It's like me talking like this, and there's usually graphics. I'm showing, visualizations, graphics and stuff too. And so I have one, my current one that I'm really working on is called Creating Calm. And it's about chronic worry and anxiety, and how to address chronic worry and anxiety. So that's $150. So it's more expensive, but it's also much more comprehensive. So the workshops are like a tiny slice. It's like, I'm going to teach just one thing. This course is much more, it's everything. I think it's not everything there is to know about chronic worry and anxiety, but it's my kind of like complete playbook for, if you struggle with this, here are like the most important things that if you do this, you're like 90% of the way there. It's relatively comprehensive. And then, so that's the self-paced course. And then I have for about 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a live, what's called a cohort-based course, which is once or twice a year. I take usually 30, maybe 40 at the most students in a given cohort into a course on emotional resilience. So it's kind of, my sort of framework or approach for how do you, in a healthy way, how do you deal with any difficult emotion, right? Whether it's anxiety, whether it's jealousy, anger, like whatever it is. So it's sort of like it's almost like my kind of overall kind of philosophy and approach to emotional health and resilience in particular. So anyway, I could go into details of that, but that's more expensive, and it's more of a commitment. So that's, I think, $350. And it's usually, I run it over the course of 4 or 5 weeks. And the way it's structured is there's like a couple live sessions a week where I'm on Zoom with people teaching, and people can ask questions. One of them is like a workshop, so where I'm doing a lot of active teaching, and then the second session is usually like an office hours. People can do Q&A and stuff like that. And then there's kind of self-paced lessons that people do on their own, and exercises that they do throughout the week. And we, over the course of like 5 weeks, we kind of work through this curriculum. I think those are the big. What am I missing? Are you on my website? I can't tell. I might be missing something. I think those are the big ones, though.
Yeah, those are the ones I recall from your website.
Okay.
How many people do you have typically for the self-paced course?
Oh, how many? Let's see. I will pull it up here and tell you. I think I've done. I launched a new. I had an older course on chronic worry, and I launched this newer one on kind of chronic worry and chronic anxiety, generally speaking. And I launched it in October, And I think I've had about, oh gosh, sorry, I can't find the exact number. But I think it's maybe 300,
Yeah.
400 students, something like that, so far. Now, admittedly, there was a lot like at the launch. Anytime you launch something, there's always a huge spike
Mhm.
there, and then kind of there. But the idea with that one, hopefully, is that it will be a sort of a steady kind of
Mhm.
beat of not tons of people, but this is something that it's available to buy anytime. So it'll be kind of a continual. And that's partly because for me, like it's nice to have I have a source of income that's much more time dependent, like the live course, Mood Mastery, which is very, a big chunk once or twice a year. But this hopefully will be more kind of a more steady source. But then it's also nice to have content that people can purchase immediately, right? Instead of having to wait for my live course, which I only do once or twice a year. So that's
Mhm.
part of the reason for doing that too.
Yeah, you're reaching people at all different levels of accessibility, both in terms of time commitment and the financial cost.
Yeah.
So that's great. I mean, just going to your mission of just getting these ideas out there to help the most people. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Uh, where does the podcast fit into all this? What inspired it? What's the purpose of it?
Oh, the podcast. um, I say that wistfully because it's been on a little bit of a hiatus. I started
Huh.
it like everyone else in the world. I started a podcast during COVID when COVID first started off. And I guess okay, if I'm being totally honest, the impetus was like I like podcasts and I think it'd be kind of fun and cool to start a podcast. Like it was that selfish and short sighted, probably. um, and it obviously fit within the kind of, generally speaking, what I do. It's like another kind of, in addition to my articles and my classes and courses and stuff, this is like another way people could kind of learn, and something that was like a little bit less me, right? In the podcast, it's more I want to highlight and ask questions of other kind of interesting people in psychology, emotional health, that kind of space generally. So yeah, and I guess the idea with those is just to find interesting people with interesting ideas, and also to kind of ask them, ask them. I sort of think about the podcast is I get this book on, someone sends me a book on, some new approach to managing anger, right? I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I read the book and I'm like taking notes. And when I take notes, I'm like, I'll ask little questions like, oh, well, this sounds okay, but like, what about this? And I always wish like, would it be cool if you could just ask the author. So that's the idea with the podcast. Like I read a book I really like. I'm like, okay, this person sounds cool. Like, let me get them on the show. And I'm going to go through the book and find the like, I don't know, 5 to 10 questions that I thought were really interesting from their work or from their article, an article they wrote or whatever. And I'm just going to ask them the questions I'm kind of curious about and want to ask about. So again, it's a little the theme here. It's a little bit selfish in that I only interview people that I'm kind of interested. There's a lot of people who, frankly, I'm sure my audience would be potentially interested in, but if I'm not interested in it, it's too much of an investment for me to put into it if I'm not really interested in it, because doing a podcast is actually a lot of work. It takes between, I'm sure but especially for this type of podcast, it was you're reading the book, you're researching their other stuff, you're kind of formulating the questions, and anyway, it's a lot. And you're editing and post production and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of why it's been on a bit of a hiatus lately, is I just didn't have time for everything and something had to go, and so the podcast was the thing to go. But I do hope to resurrect it at some point, because it is very challenging, but also really, really fun. Like I just really enjoy it. And my audience loves it. They're, I'm always getting people writing in saying, bring back the podcast. So hopefully one day.
How big is your podcast audience?
Oh man, I have no idea. I'm totally honest. I mean, it was doing pretty well. That's all I remember, is that I felt like I was like reasonably pleased with it. But yeah, I have no clue at this point. And I haven't released a new episode in probably a year and a half.
Okay.
So I'm sure it's not doing amazingly well, but
Uh-huh.
I feel like it's the kind of thing where if and when I do decide to kind of reinvest in it, I feel pretty confident that I could get some good traction, because there's already an established base there. And yeah.
Yeah. So given that these things take time and there's an administrative load to it, do you involve other people in helping you, administrative assistants or specialists of the technology or anything else?
No, I've flirted with this from time to time, like bringing on, I thought about bringing on like an editor because I think I'm a pretty good and fast writer, but I'm a terrible proofreader. Like I don't care enough about it. So I've thought about that. And at various other times I've kind of considered this kind of stuff, but I'm probably just too picky at this point. Like it feels like I guess at this point, it feels like the amount of work it would take to find someone, train someone, and then deal with if people leave, like you got to find someone else and train someone else. The kind of expected benefit of having someone to help probably isn't there. And luckily for a lot of the technical stuff, I'm fairly technically savvy. So like putting up websites and dealing with tech issues and, editing podcasts and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm good enough at that for now. If this thing became bigger, I would probably definitely consider hiring out at least kind of contract type help for that. But no, at this point, it's just me.
Mm-hmm. What's your vision for your professional growth?
For my own professional growth, or for like the work itself? Or maybe it's the same question. I don't know. Like, are you more interested in like my personal kind of professional trajectory, or where is like the newsletter and the blog and stuff going to be in the future?
Huh. I think I was originally thinking the second one, but
Mm-hmm.
now that you bring it up, I'd be very interested in the first as well.
Okay. Well, I'll have to think more about the second one. So let me answer the first one, and then maybe a flash of insight will come about the about the first one. So in terms of like the work, like where do I want it to be? Again, like I think that I write a lot. People know me best as a writer, but I think, and I've been a therapist. So I've been kind of a coach, like in the broad sense of the word. Therapy is kind of like coaching. But I think really I'm a teacher. Like I love teaching. Like I said, I love explaining things. And so I think ultimately I would, you can sort of see the outlines of it now, but I would like to have sort of an online school that is, it's just a school for learning about emotional health. Like one of the things I hear over and over and over again from all sorts of people, whether it's newsletter readers writing in after reading a good article, or especially students having gone through my courses, it's like, damn, I should have learned this in sixth grade. Like, why are we teaching this stuff when kids are young, instead of having to like go through all the stuff and then learn about it after the fact? And so not that I necessarily want to teach kids, although that would be wonderful. I'd have partners someone like that for that. But I love the idea of having a school. It doesn't have to be not a physical school necessarily. I love kind of the online virtual world for all sorts of reasons. But just a place where people can come to learn about their own psychology and emotional health, and the kind of emotional side of personal growth is a lot of the way I describe what I do. And so that could continue to be me on some level, just writing advice columns and teaching stuff. But ultimately, I think the other thing I would like to do more of too is bring in other people, other voices, to kind of do more of that. But that's hard because, again, I'm pretty picky. And most of the stuff I encounter in the space of kind of psychology and emotional health, I flat out don't like it, or I think it's not substantive enough, or it's not. I worry about sharing a lot of the stuff I see out there with my audience because I don't feel like I can support it fully. So finding people who I feel really confident, like this person, Johan, yes, let's bring him in. He's a solid dude. That's hard. Like curating the appropriate person for my kind of vision that's something that would take a lot of time and effort. But I think ultimately it's something I would love to do. And even just selfishly, because I just love learning from all sorts of people. And so anyway, so I think that's kind of the vision. And then for myself personally, where do I go? Like I don't know. I'm kind of like a learning junkie. Like I'm one of those people who could, if I was like obscenely rich and had a huge trust fund or something, I would probably just be a perpetual student because I just love like learning from people. Like I used to love in grad school going to grand rounds, which are, if people aren't familiar, grand rounds are they're especially common in like medical schools. But every week, let's say Wednesdays, somebody, it could be someone from the faculty, gives a 30-minute talk, say, on their little like research specialty. And then there's like a 30-minute Q&A afterwards where you can like ask questions and just learn, and anyone can attend, right? You don't have to be a neurosurgeon. You can just go to this neurosurgeon's talk and like listen and learn about his little or her little kind of niche in neurosurgery. And then sometimes they'll invite people from other schools and places to come in and give talks. And so you get exposure to people from all over the place. So it's this wonderful, like, kind of mixture of collegiality and learning, but it's also a little bit casual. It's not as kind of like stuffy as academia typically is. So I love that. Like, I just want to be around that all the time. So I hope my professional growth involves more and more being in situations like that. Whether it's me participating in someone else's thing like that, or me kind of facilitating or creating an environment like that. I love that. That's my jam, that kind of environment.
What a noble vision to have this online school where you can help even more people. In addition to having more course instructors, what do you think is the one thing that you would need to make this happen?
The one thing I would need to make it happen, gosh, time. Like, I think the last few years have demonstrated there's enough interest in it, but I think there's just a lot of kind of experimentation and revision to, like, kind of figuring out what works. I mean, I'm constantly, when I run my course, for instance, like, every single time I run it, I'm slightly changing up the curriculum or the format of the course based on the feedback and figuring out what works. Or I'm kind of piloting when I do workshops. Part of why I do that is to kind of test out, like, what areas are people interested in. I mean, my articles do that, but when you ask someone to pay for something, even a small amount, it's a much better test of, like, what are people really interested in, right? Because if they're willing to hand over some cash for something, that suggests there's a lot of motivation there. So I think it just needs time to kind of, for all of that to kind of foment and then settle into a coherent, because that's the thing, it has to be something that I'm interested in, people are interested in, but it has to be it has to work as a business model too. Like, I would want it to be sort of self-sufficient financially as well. So I think that's kind of the challenge and the fun of doing something like this, is kind of making it work both as a service, I guess, to people, but also as a business that can sustain itself and me and my family potentially, and something like that. So I feel like I just need more time to kind of iterate and experiment and figure it out.
Well, wish you all the best with that. And where can people find you and your work?
Let's see, a few places. I have my personal website is nickwignall.com, and there I recently have started kind of dividing up. Some of my content goes there, more of my kind of essays go there, and then I have I recently rebranded, or about a year ago, I rebranded my newsletter to what the Friendly Mind is, like, kind of the brand. It's like the idea for the newsletter, and so there's a website that goes along with it where all the articles and reader questions and stuff like that are. So thefriendlymind.com, and the newsletter is really the best place, because that's whatever I'm up to, my newest stuff. You just get a nice friendly email on Monday morning with all my stuff, and you can kind of skim through it pretty quickly and find what's interesting or not. So yeah, those are the two places, I think.
Excellent. Well, keep up the good work, Nick. And thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Johan.